Hello, everyone. Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Just a little earlier today, a couple of minutes. Just make sure you can hear me properly. Good, good. Hi, Lord Humongous. You're here early. I see there's a lot of people already on. I've already got 29 thumbs up. Billy's over there asleep. Good evening, Mike GB. Hello, Philip Simonak, Mr. Guppy, John Lord, John from Manchester, John Turtle's here. So the title of the live stream is Sinking Currencies is one of the only certainties we can be sure about these days. I guess it's a little bit like death and taxes, even though I think taxes shouldn't really be a certainty. Cupid Stunt, hi, nice to see you here from Warrington, UK. Someone made a comment saying that I said too many hellos in the last live stream, but I think it's a nice thing. And I think the live stream is also an opportunity for the viewers to ask me questions that sometimes I don't have time to answer in the normal videos in the comments. So feel free to ask any questions. Dr. Delbert from Missouri, John Colorado from Minnesota. I would have thought he was from Colorado, but maybe he moved there to Minnesota from Colorado. Rumble in the Jungle, David Bradley, Ben Gray. Hi, Ben. Ben always says hello. He's one of the first ones to say hello in every video that I make. I appreciate that. GeoFit is back. Pablo Pina never say hello during social distancing. Helton from Brazil, boa noite, maneco. That means big maneco in Portuguese. Mr. Guppy, I'm sticking to gold and silver, not Bitcoin. Good evening, Liam. Deal with the EU? I don't know. I mean, there's so much. I don't really, it's getting a little bit tedious, all this negotiations. If anything, yes, we're getting out of the Brussels bureaucracy and authoritarian directives, but we're getting our own authoritarian directives now with all the lockdowns. We've been given, I think, 5 days from our government so we can meet 4 other families. Isn't that great? I mean, if that's being free, I don't know what freedom is. Johan Hoffman from Belgium, Vancouver Island, Tony Prez. Yeah, I was looking at some of my silver coins today, and I have some nice Canadian silver dollars from the 60s. Here's a 1964 one. It's 80% silver, the Canadian coins. I think this is 1966. There you go. I guess, our parents and grandparents, if you're in Canada, they were using that as money in the 60s. It's not that long ago. Brad Grace from Leicester, Greg Capella from Las Vegas. So yeah, I've been warning people about fiat currencies for over 13 years. I wrote an article. Some of you might know about this article. I'll put a link. I've put a link in the description of this live stream, but I'll put it here right now. And this was a part 2 of an article. I don't have part 1 anymore, but part 2 is good enough. I was talking back then how central banks were going to keep inflating fiat currencies, that historically fiat currencies go to zero. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about this is that people get very impatient about the short-term noise in the price of gold and silver. And I know I do cover the markets every day and I talk about where gold is, but that's just because that's what we do. We follow the markets. We like to follow where things are. But I think people need to be more patient, because if you read that article that I wrote in 2007, at the time, for example, I was saying that we're going to see more and more sinking of the currencies. And that means gold going up, right? At the time, for example, the dollar price of gold was at $684. The British pound price of gold was at 342. The Swiss franc price 750, the euro price 502, and the yen price 73,000. And I think things now are even worse in terms of inflation. And that's the other thing. We need to keep our eyes on the ball in terms of semantics. We need to realize that inflation is the increase of in the money supply, the supply of money and credit, not backed by savings, but backed by debt. And I think a lot of people who talk about deflation, that we have deflation and that you have to hold on to the dollar and other fiat currencies, they're doing a great disservice to people. Are they doing it on purpose? No, I just think they've been brought up and educated, like me, to think that the CPI is inflation. But the CPI and the measures of prices are a consequence of inflation. So, yeah, I wouldn't really say we have deflation. And I think what these people mean by deflation is the stagnant economy. But I was listening to John Williams from Shadow Stats. He spoke to Greg Hunter a few days ago, and he was showing how CPI, if you calculate it like they did back in 1980, is running right now around 9%. And it's been happening since since 2000. For the last 20 years, CPI has basically been around 9-10%. That's the old way of calculating CPI. And the bankers and governments, they fudged the number. They've changed the way they calculate it in order to basically suck the wealth out of the middle and working class. And they've done a great job of that. I'm not saying that that's right. So those people who say we have deflation, they need to do a lot of research, I think. And that's why you need to keep a hold of gold. And is it any wonder that the gold price, on average, since 2001 has gone up by 10% every year? That is almost like equal to the rise in CPI. So there you go. Hi, Jillian B. Yeah, Billy's asleep. I'm still treating Billy's eyes with special, eye drops and other things. I don't know if you know, a couple of weeks ago, he had an ulcer in his right eye. It's been pretty bad. We're going to the vets again for the third time on Tuesday, but I think he's finally getting better. But unfortunately, I think his right eye, it's done a lot of damage to his right eye. I don't think he's seeing as well, but we're going to do our best to get him back to 100%, even though we might not be able to. So I'll stop talking now about the fiat currency sinking and look at some of your questions. Dilwyn Roberts, do you see gold going down any lower? Manipulation. In the last 3 weeks, for example, the 2 weeks prior to this last week, gold did really well on the Friday, finished up quite well. And you would think that gold was going to continue higher, and it didn't. We had twice news about vaccines. I think it was a Pfizer and then another Moderna, and they smacked gold. This Friday, gold and silver finished up quite nicely. Will there be any news about vaccines tomorrow? I don't think so. And reading a little bit about what's going on the futures side on COMEX, it looks like the commercials or the swaps dealers, they're still really short. Gold has gone down over $200 from the highs, and they still haven't been able to cover. They're still massively short. I think only a couple $1 billion below where their maximum was. And this is information that Alistair McLeod gave. And and I agree with him. The fact that they haven't been able to cover, and the fact that the same people that were long in March when gold started going up are long now. So who knows? I guess the key level is going to be just around 1850. We closed around 1872. So in the short term, it's hard to say, but in the long term, fiat currencies will go to zero. The dollar, of course, has more staying power because it's been the reserve currency. It's got the petrodollar status. But I think all of that now is winding down. I think the other thing that people are losing, they're losing faith and confidence in Uncle Sam. And why is that? Well, all the division that we've had, the fact that we haven't really had a clean transfer of power at the moment, and I think things are very uncertain politically. Yes, the mainstream media keeps saying that President Biden is the president-elect. I think it's far from over. That doesn't help either. The division in the United States, some people are saying that people need to break apart in the US. Some commentators like Doug Casey, that's not good for the dollar, because the dollar is the currency of the United States of America. And if people are talking about that, I think people should be concerned, especially foreign investors. And for Americans, they should be concerned as well, because that will mean less demand for the dollar. When people demand less dollars, the dollar will be weaker. And I think we need to keep an eye on commodity prices. I noticed, I was going through all the major commodities on Friday, where they are in terms of the charts. They're not, zooming up, but they look all like they're starting to break out. So higher commodity prices mean that people are losing faith in the dollar, that the dollar is losing value. Music lover, there is actually something negative from the WHO about one of the vaccines, and even says they do not recommend using it. I think the only way I'll take the vaccine is if I wait 5 or 10 years, and then I'll see, maybe think about it. And the other thing I would say is that why should I take a vaccine for a virus that has a very slim chance of doing any damage to me? I mean, the survival rate is above 99%. I'm willing to take the chance. Lily Robbins says Greg Mennery is starting to short the market. He thinks big dump is coming, but then says going back up to new highs. Yeah, the stock market is difficult. I remember back in when I was still working in the city, I had a fund that I worked with, my client, the fund in Italy, and it was an American guy, and we actually did a lot of S&P puts, 2003 and 4. We knew the market was overvalued, but it kept going up, and it was very frustrating. But eventually in 07, it turned and collapsed into 09. So I'm sure it will happen, but markets can remain irrational longer than people can remain solvent, right? Yeah, natural gas. I noticed that. I don't think natural gas. I would follow more like the softs, wheat, the grains, copper, the base metals. They're starting to move up. Crude oil is doing fairly well, even though stuck around that 40 level. I would keep an eye on those. Yeah, copper looks like it's breaking out. It's right at really key technical levels. So I think that's going to start being the case, that a lot of money is going to start flowing into hard assets. I made a video a few days ago about a billionaire in the US, a guy called John Malone, who gave an interview with CNBC, and he said he's been moving into hard assets in the last 12 months because he thinks central banks and governments are going to keep devaluing the currency, and they have to. I mean, a lot of you probably have seen the news about all the food banks in the US, people queuing up or in their cars in Texas. I mean, things are not good for the economy. They might be good for Wall Street and the people who work near Wall Street or DC, for people like that. But for the general public, I think, people who are not in the top 10%, I think they're struggling. So they're going to have to keep, I think the Federal Reserve as well. I mean, they even keep talking about the fact that Congress has to stimulate fiscally, and that's not even part of their remit. So, and we saw that the US Treasury is basically pulling the plug on these programs, that they're working together with the Fed by the end of the year. So I think the Fed is going to have to put their foot to the pedal and increase their QE, because the Treasury is looking not to continue these programs. And that just goes to show that the Federal Reserve has not been taken over by the Treasury. A lot of people have been saying that. And I always said, no, the Fed and the Treasury are not together. They do cooperate, but the US Treasury did not take over the Fed. Lord Humongous says he likes potatoes better than Bitcoin. There you go. The enslavement of Western civilization. That's what UK is rolling out. Health passports. Watch for news next. Also, research Rice University for information. Travel pass will not help you if you have the vaccine. Yeah, that is a worrying thing about, let's see, I mean, we're seeing a lot of people starting to protest. Here in the UK, there's been protests. I saw in California, people are protesting. I saw people in California building a fire and throwing their masks in the fire. So it's encouraging that people are starting to wake up to this nonsense. A little bit of echo. Okay. Is that better now? Because I'm using a microphone. Maybe I'm too close. Mr. Guppy, Mannarino worked for Bear Stearns before they went bankrupt. Be careful listening to him. Well, I worked for MF Global, and I left MF Global a couple of, let me, hold on. Is that better now? Is that better now? Okay. Yeah, I've taken the microphone off. I'm using the computer microphone. I hope that's better. So all I'm trying to say, just because Greg Mannarino worked for Bear Stearns doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the guy. As I said, I worked for MF Global for about 6 years, and I left a couple of months before John Corzine took over and collapsed the company. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust me. He's a Freemason. I've heard of that as well. I don't know. You speak to Freemasons, they usually say this is just a fraternal club. We do a lot of good, a lot of charity work, and I'm sure they do. Yeah, they don't. I think the Freemason story is more at the top that I think you need to be careful with. But I think they have a lot of power. A lot of people in positions of power are high up in the Masons, and they protect each other. So there you go. I'm not a Freemason. I never had enough time for those kind of things because I was working quite hard. I used to get up at 5 in the morning, be at my desk at 7, come home around 7. And when I had time off, I wanted to play golf. I didn't have time to go for Freemasons meetings and everything. I had a friend of mine who asked me to join, and I said no. Mr. Guppy says you don't ask for money. Manarino does. Well, people sometimes do send donations to me if they want. Yeah, this channel is free, and the reason why I don't ask, I don't really like to tell people what to do in terms of trading. I know Greg Manarino gives his viewers or subscribers tips or signals when to buy or sell. And I always thought that if you're going to trade, you got to be your own individual, your own man or woman, and you got to decide for yourself. I can give you my opinions on things, but I think in the end of the day, you got to do it yourself. You got to be like Jesse Livermore said. You got to be a lone wolf on Wall Street. Bob Holyoke is saying power cuts are coming. Are you in the US or UK, Bob? Graham Hobbs, personally, I trust you over a dozen Greg M's. Lily Robbins says Greg Marion tweets every move. Okay. Stephen Pack, I heard that by 2030, citizens will no longer be permitted to own private property in the USA. Yeah, there has been talk about that because the World Economic Forum, they put that on their website. Someone wrote that we'd be a lot happier if we didn't own anything, and we only rented things. But just think about it. If you're going to rent something, someone's got to own it, right? So what they want is like a feudal system where a few people own everything. But I don't actually, you might think it's not a nice thing to say, but I would say a lot of people nowadays don't own anything. They think they own things, but a lot of stuff that people own are on credit, or they lease their car, they have a big mortgage for their house, they owe a lot on their credit cards. So I'm not saying it's a good thing that we don't own anything, but I think a lot of people are already in that situation. But what I've heard is that from Canada, there was someone in Ontario that came out and said that the plan is to let everyone write off their debts. But the condition would be that you could never own anything anymore, but you would get a universal basic income. But what about for people who don't have any debt? I think hopefully we should be okay. That's the position I'm in. So why would I need to take universal basic income if I don't need it? And I think that's the best you can do right now. I think we need to focus on that, keeping our independence and not depending on these people. Yes, trading, making money, and doing well is nice, but I think we're in a time where we need to think beyond trading profits. We need to think more of saving our solvency. And yeah, I think that's what's important nowadays. And it doesn't mean to say that I'm not going to talk about the markets anymore, because I've been following the markets for like 30 years or maybe a little longer, and it's part of me. So I look at it every morning, and it's part of my videos. That's what I do. I talk about the markets and other things. So we've got 345 people. Yeah, sometimes I get 500, so it's not great, but it's all right. 122 thumbs up. Lord Humongous wants a pet Christine lizard guard for Christmas. Well, I've got her mug here. Is that what you want? You want her in behind bars? NDECP, there you go. Mr. Guppy, we did a simple calculation based off gold's price for 12 trillion above ground gold, 7.7 billion. Everyone in the world can't own even an ounce of gold. Well, yeah, an ounce of gold is like $2,000. Yeah, I mean, that's why you have other kinds of money like silver, you see? I mean, do the cap. You've got only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined. I mean, that's even less, isn't it? You can't have everyone owning one Bitcoin. So there you go. But yeah, a lot of people say there's not enough gold in the world, and that's a fallacy. That's a Keynesian fallacy, because the reason gold is money is because there is enough gold. And it's all a matter of the exchange rate. If you set the price of the fiat currency versus gold at the proper rate, it will be, it will work. And that's why it's worked as money. If gold wasn't money, there wouldn't be as much as there is above ground. People would have used it already or thrown it away because it's useless, right? But they don't. The other thing I would say to those people who, especially the Keynesians and the mainstream economists, when you talk to them and say, we should go back to sound money, we should go, and sound money could mean any kind of money, but historically, gold and silver are good, store value, they're good money, and they're sound money as well. But it all depends on the people, the bankers and the politicians. And we always get this argument that we can't go back on the gold standard because it was because of the gold standard that there was a Great Depression. And that's just completely a complete fallacy. And why is that? Well, because it's because of Wall Street and the bankers that we went into a Great Depression. All the easy money of the Fed. The Fed kept rates low to keep the British pound from going below its rate versus gold, which was a very low rate. After World War I, they should have gone back on the gold standard at a much higher rate. And that created the bubble. It wasn't because of gold. It was because the bankers abused the system. They created too much credit without gold backing. And that's what happens. But the bigger argument against the Keynesians is to say, if fiat currency and central banking was so good, how come the world is now in this deep crisis where we have insurmountable amounts of debt, where we have a Great Depression, really? Don't tell me, those that the economies are doing well. So that's the argument there, you see. So I think we need sound money. And it could be, it could be Christine Lagarde mugs. It could be Bitcoin. It could be gold or silver. Let the market decide. And I think the market will decide gold and silver again. And that's why I put my vote is for gold and silver. I think, cryptocurrencies are too new. They're too speculative. They're not that stable. Enslavement of Western civilization. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs have said to expect $20 loss of value in 2021. Yeah, and the only, I don't know against what currency they mean that 20%, but I would say that if the dollar really wants to devalue itself, it has to do it versus real things like commodities, gold and silver, because if it tries to devalue itself by 20% versus other fiat currencies, those people that run the other fiat currencies, the central banks and the governments, they're going to try to keep up with the dollar because, so yeah, the only way really is versus precious metals. Morris Phlegm. I'm prepared to inject a vaccine into my eyeball. It's that safe. Well, as I said before, why do I need a vaccine? for a virus that has a very tiny chance of killing me. And even if it does kill me, I'd rather live my life than be scared. There you go. And I just think they've conjured up these vaccines too quickly. And yeah, I'll wait 5-10 years. And if everyone's doing great after that, then I might think about it. So yeah, my strategy is to wait 5 or 10 years and see how the people who got it first react to it. Billy's a Shih Tzu, Silver Maple. He's a Shih Tzu. Pete Ashford, do you know how the BOE came to be? And we were fractional reserve in the UK while we were a reserve currency. Well, the BOE, the Bank of England, was created by a royal charter in 1694, and was mainly to help finance a war that England started. William III started versus the French. They had to borrow £1 million, and that's what it's all about. It's and even the founder of the Bank of England, William Patterson, one of the founders, said that the bank have the benefit of interest on all money that it creates out of thin air, out of nothing. So yeah, it's a really bad. I mean, I made a video yesterday about this central banking, how bad it is, and it didn't get too many views. It seems to get censored. So look at my video from yesterday. Yeah, the central banking, government central banking scheme is really bad because it gives the power to a few people to create this credit or money out of thin air, and they get the benefit of that money. While so let's say if you're a farmer and you have £1,000 worth of land and capital, you might make £50 a year, or let's say 5% on your capital, and you have to work really hard. While the central banker and the banker, they can get that £1,000 and lend it 10 times. So they will get like £500 from that £1,000. So you can see how the inequity of the system. And the other thing they do, they lumber the debt, the debt of the government on the public, and then they also, of course, had to create a really strong taxing authority because they have to make sure that that debt keeps its value. So yeah, I think the best thing would be to abolish all central banks, to let the market decide. People decide what they want to use for money or currency, be it silver or gold coins, be it conches, be it shells or beads or rocks, whatever they want. But we shouldn't have government giving people privileges, saying, yeah, we can only use this guy's money, which is the bankers, right? Yeah, that's how the Bank of England started, and unfortunately, that's how they still are. And that's why I try to be my own central banker. Hope that helped. Guppy says Japanese yen will be the first to fall. What are your thoughts about that? Well, I think they're all falling, Mr. Guppy, versus gold. I think the Japanese yen is no different. So, but I think they'll fall at the same time. But yeah, in Japan at least, they've used the debt. The Japanese are big savers. Americans aren't. So I'm not too sure. Hi, Joker Alpha. Nice to see you here. Someone thinks the euro will fail first. I mean, we've been hearing that the euro is going to collapse for about 10 years. It's still holding on. So, yeah, as I said, all fiat currencies are a derivative of the US dollar. So I think they're all going to fall together, really. So, and they're going to do it versus real things, hard assets. So the thing to do is to be out of all fiat currencies as much as possible. It's simple. I think it's a fool's game to try to, you might want to trade them, if you want. I'm not stopping anyone from trading. Trade one fiat currency versus another, but for the long haul, for strategic purposes, I think we need to be out of fiat currencies. And even Jim Sinclair says here in his pocketbook of gold, he says to own gold is to be short currency. And he doesn't say the dollar, he says currency. So if you think all fiat currencies are going to go, it doesn't matter if one goes before the other. You want to be short them. You want to have gold or silver. Mario, do you think we will have gulags in America? Well, I don't know. The situation is really difficult. It's really divided. Or you could have a breakup. You could have different states break up from other states. You could have gulags. Who knows? I mean, there's talk in Canada about re-education centers, right? Stephen Pack, Jim Sinclair says gold at 100,000. I don't know. I mean, go to 100,000. That means the end of the. That means hyperinflation. You could be right. Cordoba, what do you think of Sunak plans to raise taxes to pay for COVID-19 party bill? Yeah, I mean, the deficit looks like it's going to run at a 500 billion this fiscal year. Well, it ends in April next year. That's 25% of GDP, and might even go up more in terms of percentage terms, because GDP is not doing really well, right? It's crazy. They're going to have to find a way to service that debt. It's going to be through, inflating even more, write the debt off through inflation. But they also probably need to tax more, unfortunately. But he can't tax too much, because you tax the economy too much, you kill the economy, and then you get even less tax receipts. So yeah, he's between a rock and a hard place. Joker Alpha, thank you for the super chat. Have you heard of bond defaults by state-owned firms out of China? Is this a sign of the collapse? I've heard of them for years. There's a lot of state-owned firms, so I don't think it's a sign of the collapse. It's something that happens usually. I would say that for the collapse, you need to keep an eye on Wall Street and the City of London, the international banks, the derivatives market. You got to keep an eye on that. You've got, just like what happened in March, the collapse is, I don't think it's going to come out of China. It's going to come out of the US and Europe, the banking system. And we might not even get a collapse. What we might get is a collapse of all the currencies. So in order to stave off a financial collapse, what they'll do, they'll just print so much currency or money or reserves, whatever you want to call it, the central banks, they'll save everyone, but then, the currency will be worthless. And that's how the final collapse will be a currency collapse. Some people have argued about that. You had the collapse in 2000 was the dot-com collapse. And then you had a collapse a few years later, 7-8 years later, was the housing collapse, banking collapse. You had the sovereign debt collapse in Europe. that was staved off. I think the next collapse is going to be the collapse of all fiat currencies, only because these central banks, they just keep bailing everyone out, and there'll come a point where their currencies are going to be worthless, because the only way to bail them out is through more debt and fiat currency inflation. Thank you, Low Blood Pressure, for your super chat donation. Lily Robin, if intruder comes in my house, I tell my German Shepherd. Well, we had a dog before Billy. He was a Shih Tzu as well, and his name was Billy as well. And when my wife and I got married, and my daughter was still a baby at the time, we lived in a flat. And one day, the other dog, Billy, he woke up and ran towards the living room barking. And we all got up. We got up, and someone had broken in to the living room. And if it wasn't for the old Billy, they would have taken a lot. They took like a candelabra and some silverware, but they would have taken a lot more. So they're really good dogs. They're small, but they hear really well. Low blood pressure. Thank you again for your super chat donation. Great reset, yeah. You know why we called him Billy? Not because the other dog was Billy, but because when I called the breeder, it was in 2008, and during the crisis, right? So Billy's a credit crunch puppy, but I called the breeder and he said, "Oh, yeah, we've got one dog left, one puppy left, and he's got a name." And I said, "What's his name?" And he said, "Billy No Mates," because he was the last one left. He had all his siblings had gone. So we decided to keep the name Billy, and that's what it was. Low blood pressure. Mario, when is Queen Elizabeth going to die? Is she 100? No, I don't think she's 100. I think she's 94. What kind of question is that? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Mr. B, the public, whether you work for the government or you work in a private function, the public will always get ripped off. I'm sure the MPs are going to keep getting their their salaries raised. Yeah, Billy, at the time when I called the breeder, and that's why I call him a credit crunch puppy, the breeder said, "Well, we want 600 pounds for him," but he said, I can't sell him, and I'm running out of money, and my wife died, unfortunately, and he had to look after kids. And he said, "You can have him for 250 pounds." So Billy was a bargain, but he's a great bargain, actually. So that's why he's a credit crunch puppy. We bought him, I think, September 2008. Maybe I could have named him Lehman, Billy Lehman. That's when Lehman collapsed. What might we be missing that we need to buy? We're all likely missing something no one has considered. Yeah, that's a good point. Candles. If we're going to have power outages, have some candles at home. You don't have to stock up, but just have some candles. I remember in Brazil, when I was growing up, you had a lot of power outages, so we always had candles. But they only went on for like 10, 15 minutes, but we always had candles. So candles could be a good thing to have. Red Shield. Yeah, the Bowers, the Rothschilds, their original name was Bauer, Bauer, but then I think it was the guy, the founding father. They put a red sign outside their house to I think it was to denote that they dealt in coins and money and stuff, and then they changed the name to Red Shield, which is Rothschild in German. So that's the story there. Bible studies. What is a good crypto wallet that is not Coinbase? Well, I haven't been I have like a Trezor wallet. But to be honest, I don't use those too much. I have a blockchain.info app. That's a wallet, but you should Google that, because I don't do too much on cryptocurrencies, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who can advise you better than I can. Just Google which private wallet should I have for Bitcoin. Yeah, Bauer is a farmer. That's right. It's like in Afrikaans, Boer, the Boer War, the Dutch farmers down in South Africa. Yeah, blockchain.com. That's right, Mr. B. Harry Chu. I think Soros is more linked to the Wallenberg family from Sweden, really. I remember in the city, I worked as a futures and options broker, and I had a colleague who dealt for the Soros fund, the Quantum Fund, and they only executed the trades with him. His account, though, for the Quantum Fund for futures was with SC Banken, the Scandinavian bank, Swedish bank, SC Banken. And I always thought that's strange. Why would you have a futures account with a Swedish bank? Because most of the futures accounts were with American banks and UK brokers, American brokers. And SC Banken was a small futures firm. They had a small futures firm. Then I learned that SC Banken, which is owned by the Wallenbergs, basically backed George Soros in the 60s when he started the funds. So I think he might have a relationship with the Rothschilds, but I think it's more with the Wallenbergs. And I think Wallenberg, I think his name is David Wallenberg, he goes to all the Bilderberg meetings. Low blood pressure. Have you ever seen the royal family while walking around in London? Actually, I do have a story about that. I was walking from the train station, London Bridge, and I used to work on the other side of London Bridge, of course, London Bridge Station. Walked over London Bridge, down Lower Thames Street, and I used to get a coffee and then cross the street, and the lights were green, the pedestrian lights were green to cross. And I was about to cross, and these police motorcycles just drove by, and I had to stop. And all of a sudden, I see this limousine, black, Rolls Royce, big limousine driving. That was like 10 to 7 in the morning. And in the back of the limousine was the Queen and her daughter, Princess Margaret. So yeah, that's the only time I've seen the Queen. She was like a few feet away from me crossing the road, and it was before 7 a.m. And she was coming from the east side. She was coming from outside London. So I don't know what she was doing. It's strange. So I did see her. No, I haven't seen Gordon Brown. I haven't seen him. So that's when I saw the Queen, yeah, and her daughter. They're sitting in the back of the car, and the police stopped us from crossing so they could drive past. What currency is too big to inflate? None of them are good enough. No currencies are good. They're going to inflate everything. The more debt we have in the world, that means the more they're inflating it. Nuno Teixeira, China with new trade deal seems to be more capitalist than EU. Yeah, one of my viewers sent me the Trends Journal. I don't subscribe to Gerald Celenti's Trends Journal, but someone sent it to me, and I was reading it. Gerald Celente said, the business of America has been war, and he's right. And he said, the business of China is business. So there you go. But people, a lot of times, get emotional about China. All they can say, oh, the Shicoms, they're communists. And I agree, they are. They're different. But they're also very good business people, the Chinese. And I think that's what they want to do. They want to do business with people. Of course, they'll have a lot of power and influence because of that. But that's the way I see it. Doesn't mean, oh, sorry, yeah. It was Princess Anne, Simon, that I saw. Princess Anne and the Queen, they're sitting in the back of the limousine. And it had a little flag as well, their family crest, the limousine. Nice limousine. Yeah, Princess Margaret was her sister. That's right. Sorry, got confused. George Norman, with $2,000 to start investing, where do you recommend? Well, there's two things. Investing, you know, you invest in the bit, you invest in a business that you think has potential. That's what you do. I personally, if I had 2,000 to invest, maybe I'd buy $1,000 worth of a little bit of silver and gold, physical, and that's saving really, because gold and silver don't give a dividend or anything. But I would say the mining stocks are looking good, and a lot of mining stocks are going to start paying dividend and are already paying. So yeah, look into the mining shares. I think Newmont and a few others are starting to pay dividends. So I would do that. I'm not telling you to do that. It's just what I would do. I don't give financial advice. Padenda says buy 1 ounce of gold. Yeah, you could do that. I would probably buy $500 of silver and $500 of gold and put 1,000 in, let's say, Newmont Mining. They have a dividend of 2.6%. So I think that's, and they're going to track the gold price. Morris Phlegm, I'm having a midlife crisis. Help. You're in the wrong channel for that. I don't advise on that. Young Austrians thought on Tesla. He was a great scientist, and it's too bad that people don't talk about him more than they do. But I know you're asking about the company called Tesla. No, I don't have any thoughts on that. I have a lot of thoughts on Nikola Tesla, because he actually devised this. He found a way to harness free energy from the stratosphere, and unfortunately, that was, put down by the bankers and the oil industry. But Tesla, the car, I don't really have any views on it. Not interested really. I know it's gone up a lot. I don't follow it. Stanislav Grzymała in Poland, a company that sell groceries like meat, have the best profits. We get a lot of Polish meats in the UK, like sausages. They're really good. I like the Polish sausages. Buy cheap silver. You only get spot for it in the end. I saw that, Mr. B. Boris found 16.4 billion. Yeah, the biggest increase in military spending since World War II. Yeah, our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren will be paying for that. We'll be paying for it as well through inflation and through taxation. I think he's desperate trying to find something. David Bakar, do you advise purchasing silver in small denomination? Yeah, I mean, I have big bars, I have smaller bars, 1 ounce coins. I have old circulating coins like florins. I have silver dimes. You buy whatever you like. And yeah, just make sure you do a bit of homework, see if you get a good price and that you're dealing with a reputable counterparty. Young Austrians, yeah, I think there's a good chance of silver and gold being remonetized in the next, I would say, in the next decade, really. So I think there is a very good chance they're going to have to resort to sound money again because they've abused the current system so much. And usually, historically, once fiat currencies collapse, you always resort to precious metals. In France, after the assignats and the mandats collapsed in 1796, well, Napoleon put the country back on gold. So there you go. Pete Ashford, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on 77th Brigade? Yeah, I think they're all over the internet, and they're quite. Yeah, how can I say? That's probably where a lot of that 16.4 billion is going to be going. You know, defense spending. Yeah, there you go. That's what I think about them. Have you watched UK Column News? They talk a lot about them. UK Column News. I highly recommend that YouTube channel. Thank you, John Meyer, again for your super chat. And yeah, thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it. Banks of Green Willow Project. Yeah, he says 77th Brigade was mobilized second week of February. Yeah, the other thing I noticed in the beginning of the year, before the crisis started, is that the Treasury issued 14 billion pounds of gilts, new gilts. Yeah, which means they borrowed 14 billion that no one expected them to do. And everyone thought that was strange. And I think they were, in hindsight, and I've spoken about this months ago, in hindsight, I think they were testing the waters because they knew what was coming in March. So I think it was first week or two of January, they borrowed 14 billion, and everyone was surprised. And look at how much they've had to borrow this year, right? So yeah, that together with the 77th Brigade, you put 2 and 2 together, and you kind of wonder about this crisis, right? Tricky Dicky, thank you for your super chat. No return to austerity and 16 billion for defense. Where's the money coming from? Printing press, taxes, inflation. There you go. Not deflation, like the bond king, what's his name? Steve Van Meter still thinks we're having deflation. The guy needs to learn the definition of inflation. Ren Gavrili, thank you for the super chat. What do you think? Why do you think Sweden didn't lock down? What are your thoughts about the Swedish economy going forward? Well, there's a few points about Sweden. I think the Swedes probably are more accommodating, and the government maybe and the public trust each other a bit more. So, they would follow, suggestions. Maybe that's why they didn't lock down. I think Sweden already is down a path where the Swedes would accept, cashless society because it's already cashless. And and that's why I think they didn't need to lock down. And maybe it's part of the game, right? To keep people divided, people to say, oh, look, Sweden didn't do this. But I think Sweden is going to go along with the program, the Great Reset program, even though I hope it fails. As for the Swedish economy, I've seen, not in detail, but I've seen that it hasn't done as badly, of course, as the other economies. But in the long term, it's tied at the hips. It's tied at the hip with all the other Western economies. But to be honest, I don't know that much about the Swedish economy to tell you exactly what I think, in detail. Mr. Guppy, what if Dent and Burger King are right? Well, I've spoken about this. The only way we're going to have a deflationary collapse, and by deflationary collapse, I mean the writing off of debt, the destruction of the money supply. The only way we're going to have that is if governments pull the plug, if central banks start raising rates, and then it would be a complete implosion and collapse of businesses, banks, bonds, stocks, and a lot of counterparties failing. So I would want to have gold and silver in such a scenario, just like in the 30s. Gold did very well when you had the Great Depression and the collapse. So gold does really well in the deflationary collapse, which we don't have, and it will do well if they keep doing what they're doing now, which is inflating, spending a lot of money. You saw the UK, 16 billion they found, it's nothing for them now. So, and we're borrowing like almost 30% of GDP this year. So, yeah, I have thought about that. But I think the only way gold will not do well is if we're able to gradually go back to raising interest rates and paying off the debt and getting the economy growing again. And I think that's almost impossible. And why is that? Well, because they tried that. The Fed tried to normalize rates back in from, I think, 2016 to 2018. They started raising rates, unwinding the balance sheet. And by the end of 2018, the stock market was collapsing. By 2019, September, the repo market was collapsing. So they had to reverse everything. So that's how I counter it. So let's say there was a collapse of everything, the Dow dropped to 1,000. I think gold could be still at 1,500 or 2,000. And yes, it might not have gone up from here, but if you got gold at 1,500 or 2,000, but you got the Dow at 1,000, the NASDAQ at 500, the S&P at 200, house prices collapsing, gold at 1,500 or even 1,000 would be will have held its value really well in relative terms. So that's how I answer that question. Jack Nichols, thank you for your super chat. You're welcome. Mr. Guppy was the first to call Van Meter Burger King. Well, he calls himself the Born King. I've always had a problem. I have a problem with someone who calls himself a king or someone who calls herself a queen. I saw that John Adams had kind of a debate, the Australian guy, with Steve Van Meter about inflation and deflation. All right, we'll keep going for a few more minutes. We're over an hour, but why not? Let's keep going. What was the Swiss crime syndicate name Mario mentioned? Something with a W. Not sure. Swiss crime syndicate with a W. Oh, World Economic Forum. Yeah, that's the World WEF. Oh, I think you mean the family is the Wallenbergs. They're Swedish, not Swiss. Wallenberg. They're Swedish. Swedish, not Swiss. Yeah, the Wallenberg are not Swiss. It's Wallenberg, not Berger. Wallenberg. I think they own most of Sweden, the Wallenbergs. Maybe that's why they didn't have a lockdown, because they already own the whole country. Liam Renton, how long do you think the collapse will take to play out? I think, the economic implosion is going to keep going for a few years, the whole decade, really. Some people think the stock market might bottom in 2022, but I think it's going to be like the 70s. And then maybe, in the early 2030s, things will stabilize. So it's not going to be pretty, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean to say you can't profit or flourish, in such a environment. I think if you focus, I personally voting with hard assets, I think they will do well, and that doesn't seem to make sense, because everyone keeps saying, "Oh, we're going to have deflation," but what they mean by deflation is going to be very slow economic growth. But we had the same thing in the 70s, where we had high unemployment, we had recessions, and we had inflation. Commodities did great in the 70s. So it doesn't necessarily follow that if you have a kind of a, how can I say, stagnant economy, that you can't have higher prices. All right. Just a couple of more questions, and then we'll call it a day. Greta Thunderpants. Zarit, how to escape the Great Reset? That's a good question. How to avoid vaccines? Well, maybe get to know someone who can get you. I think people are going to have to resort to getting things. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you have a friend in high places and they can get you a certificate, something like that. But I think could be the only way around. Or you could decide not to have your vaccine, and you're going to have to change your life. I think, unfortunately, you're not going to be traveling around. If you travel around a lot or do other things, you're going to basically have to live your life almost like a hermit, I think. Let's hope it doesn't happen, though. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'll speak to you tomorrow. Have a great week, and take care. Bye.